Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Welcome to our second lesson of our simplified Tajweed series, which is a series of Tajweed lessons introduced by Quran University uniquely designed Quran learning management system with the purpose of introducing Tajweed in a modern and easy approach. Through this series of lessons, you'll be introduced to Tajweed rules using a unique, modern, and innovative approach to teach Tajweed, utilizing the color codes of Mushaf al-Tajweed as a common denominator to link between those lessons and Tajweed rules. With such approach, we aim to make the understanding of Tajweed rules much easier and help you to practically apply those rules while reading the Quran. So let's start Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim with our first lesson, Introduction to Tajweed, and how to improve your Tajweed using our simplified Tajweed series. Let's start by defining the objectives of this introduction. At the end of this introduction, you'd be able to understand the meaning and definition of Tajweed and Lahan. You'd also become aware of the methods used to teach and learn Tajweed, and hence realize what are the best methods to learn Tajweed today. You would realize how Quran learning management system applications would help you to master Tajweed. And you would understand the value of using colors used in Mushaf al-Tajweed al-Mulawwan in reminding you of those Tajweed rules. And you'll take a bird's eye view of the topics of this series, the simplified Tajweed series. So let's start by defining the meaning of Tajweed. Literally, Tajweed means improvement and mastery. التحسين والإتقان. But according to Quranic sciences terminology, Tajweed means a Quranic science that shows the rules that must be adhered to while reciting the Holy Quran, where every letter should be pronounced properly according to what Muslims had received from the messengers of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Peace be upon him. So, why do we have to learn Tajweed? Tajweed purpose is to conserve and preserve the tongue from Lahan, which is pronunciation mistakes, while reciting the Holy Quran. So, what's Lahan? What are recitation mistakes? It is defined as mistakes in pronunciation and deviation from correctness while reciting the Holy Quran. There are two types of mistakes: obvious mistakes and hidden mistakes. So, there are two types: obvious, which means clear mistakes, al-lahn al-jali, and obscured or hidden mistakes, al-lahn al-khafi. So what's the difference between the obvious and the obscured? Let's start with the obvious. In here, the mistakes are related to classic pronunciation of the Arabic letters. Accordingly, such pronunciation mistakes would result in the alteration of the intended proper Quran meaning. While in the obscured, the mistakes are not related to classic pronunciation of Arabic letters, but they are actually related to the pronunciation of those letters based on Tajweed rules. Accordingly, such mistakes does not result in prejudice to meaning or expression. Obvious mistakes are called obvious because it's clear for anyone who knows Arabic, even if that person does not know Tajweed rules. While on the contrary of that, the obscured mistakes are hidden to the general public, and only reciters who are expert in Tajweed rules would be able to notice them. Examples of the obvious mistakes: it could result from substituting some letters with similar ones in pronunciation, such as replacing the ayn with a, or replacing the ta with ta. Let's give an example from Al-Fatiha. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Al-Alameen. It's a common mistake for the newcomers to the Arabic language or non-native Arabic speakers to replace the ayn with a. So this is the ayn, and they mispronounce the letter ayn and replace it with the letter a. So instead of saying al-alameen, they would say al-alameen. The right way of pronouncing it is al-alameen. This is a very obvious and clear mistake. We're going to take an example or some examples of the obscured or hidden mistakes. And examples are missing the noon resonance, which is called ghunna, or the mad, which is the vowels elongation, or the idgham. And we'll give an example of idgham here. Man ya'mal are two words. This word has ended with a silent n, a noon sakina. Man ya'mal. Hukum al-idgham, the idgham rule means taking those two words and merging them together to produce one word or one letter. It will become من يعمل. So من يعمل to من يعمل is idgham. And here we're converting the noon into ya and joining the two yas to produce a stressed ya. This is a hukum of ahkam al-tajweed, of the rules of tajweed, and it's called idgham. So if you didn't know this rule before, then if you heard such a mistake, it will be obscure for you. It will not be obvious for you. So this is the purpose of this whole series, to make those mistakes clear and obvious, and will make those rules also clear and obvious, so you wouldn't be doing such mistakes while reciting your Quran. Learning Tajweed. You need to fulfill two elements to learn Tajweed. The first one is a background knowledge, and the second one is a practical skill. Like all practical sciences, knowledge alone is not enough, since it has to be coupled by a practical skill where we put that learned knowledge into practice. The background knowledge, student should understand the concepts of the science of Tajweed, and students should have enough knowledge about the rules of Tajweed. While the practical skill, that knowledge about the rules of Tajweed has to be put to practice by applying the Tajweed rules learned during actual recitation of Quran. The skill of applying those rules develops over time. It would be called a skill once the student applies Tajweed rules without thinking about them. From this we can conclude that Tajweed is not a theoretical science that you could learn only by reading about its rules from books. Rather, it is a practical science that requires training in order to develop the skill of proper pronunciation according to Tajweed rules, similar to any language training skills. So, in order to learn Tajweed, you need to build the two elements. You need to acquire the knowledge where you learn the Tajweed rules, then you should develop the skill by practice by listening to Tajweed scholars, followed by practice to build the skills needed to apply the learned rules. Learning Quran recitation is not different from learning any new language. There are two possible methods to learn a language. The first is natural, parent-based learning, and the second is classical teacher-based learning. In the natural parent-based learning, young children copy and imitate their parents subconsciously as they learn their native mother tongue language. While in classical teacher-based learning, there is a curriculum, a teacher, and his students or her students in a school environment. The natural-based learning is characterized by being subconscious, and the core of this learning process is based on practical imitation or copying or mimicking the parents. And knowledge does not precede practice, but both goes hand in hand. While the classical teacher-based learning is characterized by being a conscious process, the student knows that they are in the school and the teacher is there to teach them. The core of this learning process is knowledge rather than practice. Teacher gives a background knowledge all the time. Knowledge usually precedes practice, where you are given lessons on vocabulary and grammar first, and it is usually after that that practice follows. Now we're going to correlate those two methods of learning a language to learning Tajweed. The natural parent-based learning can be similar to Tajweed self-learning, where Quran student can learn Tajweed subconsciously by listening to Quran teacher or a professional reciter recording. Then after that, the learner, the student, would try to copy and imitate the same proper pronunciation and the style of the recitation of the teacher or the reciter. In here, students would perform self-check on their own. They would analyze the difference between the reciter's pronunciation and their pronunciation, and then try to keep on repeating the pronunciation till they, over time, reach the closest pronunciation to that of the reciter. On the other hand, we can compare the classical language teacher-based learning to Tajweed teacher-based learning. In that case, Quran student can learn Tajweed consciously by acquiring first the knowledge, learning the knowledge of Tajweed from the teacher, then applying practice. They listen to their teacher or reciter, and then they imitate the same proper pronunciation and style of recitation of the teacher. And in this case, it is the teacher that provides the feedback, where the teachers correct their students' mistakes. We have concluded that there are two possible methods to learn Tajweed: self-learning, Tajweed self-learning, and Tajweed teacher-based learning. And that in both there are two essential steps. The student has to listen, then imitate. So by listening, the student acquires subconsciously the rules of Tajweed, and then by imitating, the student tries as much as possible to mimic or to imitate or to copy the style of the professional reciter. Same thing is there with the Tajweed teacher-based learning, but it has the extra step where the teachers provide feedback. It is an extra advantage where teachers do correct the mistakes of their students. The best of the two worlds can be achieved if we combine the two styles together. The student do self-learning, then a teacher checks on his or her performance. Now there is a special software that would help you improve your Tajweed Quran Learning Management System, برنامج الجامعي لحفظة القرآن الكريم. This program is a unique Quran education-oriented solution. It is the most innovative Quran educational software today. It utilizes multiple innovative tools to help you study the Quran, master recitation, plus minus memorization. For those who are only interested in improving their Tajweed and improving their recitation, it will do. And for those who would like also to memorize the Quran, it will also help them. Now, in association with that, they will get an integrated Quranic library that would help you understand what you are reciting. The application has a PC version and it also has a mobile version. Now, how would that application help you learn Tajweed? Well, there are two possible methods to learn Tajweed using Quran Learning Management System. The first one is Tajweed self-learning, and the second one is Tajweed teacher-based learning. The Tajweed self-learning would utilize a very specialized tool called Listen and Repeat tool, and that tool would help a subconscious learning of Tajweed. And in addition to that, there is a series of lessons, Quran LMS Simplified Tajweed Lesson, and this introduction that you are watching now is the first one of those lessons in the series. Now, in the Tajweed teacher-based learning, you will get both same Listen and Repeat tool and the Simplified Tajweed lessons. In addition, you'll get two more teacher-based tools, the Quran LMS Asynchronous Teacher Correction tool and a Quran LMS Private One-to-One Teacher Real-Time Online Correction. Let's talk about the first tool. Quran LMS provides a tool named Listen and Repeat tool for students to make learning Tajweed subconsciously so easy. This is the tool.
وَإِنَّ كَثِيرًا مِنَ النَّاسِ
وَإِنَّ كَثِيرًا مِنَ النَّاسِ
وَإِنَّ كَثِيرًا مِنَ النَّاسِ.
And as we have just seen, the student would listen to a professional reciter recording. Then the student would immediately record his or her own imitated recitation while trying to copy as much as possible the style of the professional reciter. Then the tool would immediately provide the student with the ability to perform a self-check by comparing the sound and the shape of both audio waves, the student's audio wave versus the reciter's audio wave. Now, the second tool is basically the series of the lessons. Now, there are almost 30 plus lessons directed to teaching Tajweed. It takes you from a beginner who knows nothing about Tajweed and builds gradually the knowledge and to cover all the necessary lessons that will help you understand and then apply the Tajweed. It doesn't go to the depth that only scholars need, but it goes to the depth that every Muslim needs to recite his Quran or her Quran properly. So, Quran LMS provides all what you practically need to know about Tajweed. And this is provided through a series of lessons that covers the science of Tajweed in a simplified, modern approach. And we'll explain this in the next few minutes. And to the level deep enough to allow you understand Tajweed, providing you the necessary back knowledge for the practical approach. This series of lessons would be also provided in the teacher-based learning, in addition to the listen and repeat tool that we've mentioned earlier. In addition, we've mentioned in teacher-based learning that you'll get to communicate with your teacher through what we call asynchronous teacher correction tool. And this tool is another innovation of Quran LMS. It's unique to this Quran LMS, and we'll explain it here. Now, in communication between the teacher and the students, there are two ways. The first way is to have an asynchronous communication, which means that the student and the teacher, they don't need to be both together available around the net at the same time. In this application, this tool, the student sends his recording to the teacher. Now, the student can send it in the morning, and the teacher could view it afternoon. The teacher corrects it at his own time. Then he sends or she sends the correction back to the student. Now, this communication, as we have seen, will be with marking the mistakes on the Quran. The homework would be given a bracket at the beginning and a bracket at the end, so it will be between brackets. Now, what's in between is recorded by the student. Now, once it reaches the teacher, the teacher starts to mark the mistakes on the Quran pages, and then the teacher would record audio and text comments to be sent back to the student. Now, the student reads the teacher comments and listen to them, and then the students start to work on correcting those mistakes.
ومما رزقناهم الخطأ هو ترك قلقلة القاف أفمن كان مؤمنا الخطأ هو ترك إخفاء النون الساكنة عند الكاف.
As we have just seen, we have seen a correction of a teacher where both written comments are there and audio comments are there. Now, this will help you as a student that you have recited the Quran utilizing the listen and repeat. You worked on your own in improving your tajweed, but now with the teacher help, you will fine-tune the learning process that you have taken on your own, and the teacher would always check mistakes that probably you couldn't elicit on your own. So definitely the teacher presence and the experience of the teacher would add value to improving you and correcting your mistakes. Now, the innovation in this wonderful method of asynchronous communication is in that it does not require the presence of the two parties together online at the same time. And this is a great tool because no limitation of longitudes or latitudes would really prevent the communication between the teacher and the student. In communication through Skype or through a telephone call, it has to be at a time that suits both the teacher and the student. They have to schedule a meeting online. They have to get on at the same time. A student could be in the States while the teacher could be in Egypt, and the time could not be suitable for both. One of them could be at nighttime, the other one could be at daytime. Now, through this asynchronous tool, these limitations are history. And we will hope, inshallah, that you will find it so helpful and the teachers would be able to reach you wherever you are, anytime during the day. Now, we mentioned also that the Quran LMS also provides the classical private one-to-one teacher real-time online correction. In this, there is a video conferencing tool that is special to Quran. It is not like that in Quran LMS we use Skype or Blackboard or any of the trade tools, third-party tools. We have our own private and unique tool for online communication. The student would read in front of his teacher, who corrects him or her by synchronous communication over the net. Now, through a video conference. Now, the student is reading, could be probably in England, while the teacher could be correcting him in Hyderabad. It doesn't matter. the sheikh or the teacher directly and in real time corrects the error for the student, and they communicate as if they are in the same room, despite of the long distance that separates them across the globe. Whether we're using the desktop version or the mobile version, in both cases we use the Uthmani script of Medina Mus'haf with Tajweed color codes. And this is what we call قواعد ألوان التجويد, where every Tajweed rule, hukum, is given a color code. Now, these color codes would alert us to Tajweed rules while reading the Quran. Now, in Quran LMS, both desktop and mobile version, we adopted Al-Rasm Al-Uthmani, the Uthmani script. So we don't use text, we use the actual look and feel of the real Quran, based on Mus'haf al-Madina al-Munawwara, al-Madina Mus'haf, printed by King Fahd Press. Now, that we have added to it the colors of Mus'haf al-Tajweed. And those colors will help you to learn and easily recognize the rules of Tajweed by linking the colors of the letters to Tajweed rules. For example, the orange color here, in يستهزئون الواو, is basically an elongation med for 2 to 4 to 6 units of med, harakat. The gray color here reflects the idgham, or something that is actually non-pronounceable. In here, the alif in the liya'kulu is not pronounced. So we say liya'kulu and we don't say liya'kuluwa. The ajim here, the blue color, reflects qalqala. Now, the green color reflects ighunna or ikhfa. So these different colors in Mus'haf al-Tajweed reflects قواعد ألوان التجويد, or the rules of Tajweed colors legend. So for example, the dark red color means med ست حركات لزوما, which is obligatory elongation of a vowel, which means med, and for 6 units or movements. Now the bright red color means you must elongate that vowel for between 4 to 5 movements or units. Now the orange color, it means a med for 2, 4 or 6, while the light brown or golden, it means a med for 2 movements, 2 units or 2 seconds. Now the green indicates حكم الإخفاء والغنة, either hiding إخفاء or غنة, which means giving that letter a nasal tone for 2 units. The gray, it indicates either merging 2 letters, idgham, or hiding a letter so it will become non-pronounceable. The dark blue means tafkhim, and it's usually for ra, and the light blue is al-qalqala. Now, these words that I have just mentioned, whether it's med, ikhfa, ghunna, idgham, tafkhim, qalqala, are actually the Tajweed rules. And if you don't know them, don't worry about it. This is why we're having this series. So while you go through this series, you will be able to understand each one of those different rules, and you're going to utilize the colored Quran to help you to find and remember where to find those rules and to apply the proper pronunciation according to those Tajweed rules while you read the Quran. Now, after we have learned what Tajweed is and what's the importance of Tajweed, let's tell you how we're going to help you through this series to learn Tajweed. This series of lessons are created in a way that will take you from knowing nothing about Tajweed, gradually building the knowledge needed for you to practice Tajweed at an expert level, that practically allow you to pronounce Quran in a professional way according to Tajweed rules. It starts with a bit of history about how the Quran was scripted and how the tilawa and different qira'at has been registered. After that, the second lesson introduces the science of Tajweed, which is practically this lesson that we are going through right now. After this lesson, it's important to know how to properly pronounce Arabic letters by knowing the articulation and characteristics of these letters, what we call in Arabic al-makharij wa sifat. articulation and characteristics of each of the Arabic letters. And based on that, you'll be able to pronounce the Arabic letters properly according to Tajweed instructions. After that, we introduce the vowels of the Arabic language and the harakat, a concept of adding vowelization, adding a small vowel to any letter in Arabic. In fact, understanding the concept of vowelization, harakat, is very crucial to understand a lot of the following lessons, because it is linked to a lot of Tajweed rules. And it is also important to understand later on what we're going to talk about as med rules, elongation rules. Because med is nothing but taking a vowel and extending it, lengthening it, making it pronounced for a longer period. After that, we're going to take a lesson related to the previous lesson on articulation and characteristics, where we look not on the normal proper way of pronouncing letters, but at the faulty way of pronouncing it. This lesson on common pronunciation mistakes is very important for non-Arabic speakers trying to pronounce the Quran letters in Arabic, because their background of their mother tongue could affect negatively the way they pronounce the Arabic letters. With that knowledge being built, we can now understand the common mistakes of Tilawat al-Fatiha, where a special lesson is dedicated for that due to the importance of Fatiha in Salah for Muslims. Then you'll have a lesson on starting Tilawa rules, which is basically saying أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم and بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم, and these are called al-isti'adatu wal-basmala. Then we're going to talk about the concept of meeting of two letters. Whenever two letters converge, they meet together, what would happen? At this stage, we're just giving an introduction, where later on, we're going to give the same lesson, but at more deeper details at a later advanced stage. What we need here is to understand that two letters, when they meet, it leads to defining certain Tajweed rules, and that is the introduction to get into the Noon Sakina when it meets with any other letter of the alphabet. And based on that, there'll be several scenarios or cases that would lead to several Tajweed rules. In certain cases, the Noon would be merged with the following letter, and we call that idgham or merger, while in other cases, the Noon would be exchanged with a different letter, leading to the rule of iqlab, conversion. While in other situations, it has to be pronounced clearly, where the hukum would be idhar, exposure, and there is also the rule of ikhfa, where we hide the Noon. Then we move to another letter, to the letter Mim. When the Mim meets another letter, it results in several Tajweed rules, and we're going to talk about the ikhfa of the Mim Sakina. And then when the Mim or the Noon are stressed, are emphasized, they have also some rules, and that's what we learn here about ahkamu an-nun wal mim al-mushaddadain, the rules of emphasized Mim and Noon. And then we're going to talk about certain letters. There are about 7 letters, qutb jad, that needs to be pronounced deeply, aggressively, and that's what we call qalqala. And then we're going to talk about another group of letters which has to be either pronounced heavily, tafkhim, or on the contrary, pronounced attenuated, lightly. We call that tarqiq. And then we're going to talk specially about the tarqiq or tafkhim of one letter, which is the letter ra. Tafkhim and tarqiq for ra. Then we're going to go back to the vowels. These vowels, in certain occasions, has to be extended, lengthened. In Arabic, we have 3 vowels, the a, the u, and the e. And these vowels, sometimes we extend their length. We say oo instead of oo, a instead of a, e instead of e. And this lengthening is basically what we call med in Tajweed, and there are several cases for med that we're going to talk about in this section. After that, we're going back to the convergence of the 2 letters, but we're going to talk about it in details because there are 3 more lessons that will be related to those details. From there, we're going to move to the letter lam. Lam has a special situation where sometimes we pronounce it and sometimes we don't pronounce it. And this is the lesson of solar and lunar lam. We call that in Arabic al-lam al-shamsiyya wal-lam al-qamariyya. Then we're going to talk about something related to the script. The last 3 lessons are related to scripting of the Quran. Sometimes the alif is written clear as a long alif. Sometimes it's written as a short alif. We call it a dagger alif, like a small dagger. And in that lesson, we're exploring that. And the alif itself can sometimes, when it is related to the group, we call that the plural alif. A special lesson will be dedicated for the plural alif and other types of alifs in the Quran. If we look at the Uthmani script of the Quran, we'll find that sometimes there are some scripts that are written but are not pronounced. And the opposite is also true. And that's why we dedicated a lesson for that purpose. It's called Scripted versus Pronounced in the Quran. That lesson will help you to deal with such situations. In our approach, those lessons would always be linked to Qawaid Alwan al-Tajweed, the legend of Tajweed rules, where every Tajweed rule, every hukum of Tajweed is related to a color on Mushaf al-Tajweed, which would make it easy for you to realize the hukum, the rule of Tajweed, upon reading the Quran and thus apply it. And before we finish this introduction on Tajweed, we'll introduce you to some of the Tajweed terms. Every science has its terminology, and the science of Tajweed has its own terminology as well. We're going to quickly introduce some of them here, and don't worry about understanding them because each one of them will have a separate lesson that will describe it in details. And in here, it's no more than a quick introduction to those terms that will give you an idea of what you're going to learn in this series of lectures. The first term is called idhar, izhar. Al-idhar in Arabic is a word meaning to show. So basically, idhar means to show the letter without modification or to pronounce the letter as it is written. And it is the basic rule of all ahkam al-tajweed. It's the basic rule of tajweed. Whenever there are no special rules, izhar comes to surface. And for that same reason, it is given the black color in the colored Mushaf al-Tajweed. The reason is black is the natural color for writing. So we use black whenever the letter is written and pronounced. But whenever the pronunciation differs from the writing, then we give the different colors as we see in the following rules. So the next rule we're going to look at is ghunna. And the example is the noon, the N, the noon here in لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهِ. In here, when the letter is given extra nasal tone through stressing its articulation through the nasal cavity, in the cases of noon and mim, and this is a noon, then it's called ghunna. And again, there is a special lesson that will describe this in details. And again, the ghunna is given the green color in Mushaf al-Tajweed. The third rule is idgham, and an example is waqul rabbi. There are two letters here. The first one will disappear, and when we merge the two letters together, when we say waqul rabbi instead, waqul rabbi, and in here, when we merge two letters together, the first letter disappears, while the second one appear. We merge the first into the second, and we call this idgham, and we give it the color gray, indicating for that this letter would disappear while idgham is performed. Another example for using the gray color is for what does not utter. In certain cases, we write a letter but we don't pronounce it, like the alif here in وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. We don't say وَعَمِلُوا wa, we say وَعَمِلُوا, as if there is no alif. And so when we write a letter and we don't utter it, we completely remove the character while speaking. In that case, we represent the unpronounced letter with a gray color. Now, ikhfa, looking at this green colored meme here in يَوْمَهُمْ بَارِزُونَ, when we remove the oral articulation of a letter, and this is special for noon and meme, yet we keep its nasal tone. يَوْمَهُمْ بَارِزُونَ. We do also give it the green color like the ghunna. Another hukum is iqlab, and we look also at the gray noon here with a green meme on top of it, and that's what we call iqlab. When we replace the pronunciation of a character with another one, we flip it. So in here, tunbitu, we replace the noon with a meme. That's why the noon is given gray, because it will be not uttered, and it will be replaced by a meme with ghunna. So from tunbitu to tumbitu, we have flipped the letter N to the letter M, and it will be the N, the noon, would be actually given the gray color because it's like those, and it will be replaced by the M. Another hukum or rule is lengthening. وَمَا أُوتِيتُم. In this case, we lengthen the reading of the vowel, we elongate it. So instead of saying ma utitum, we say ma utitum. And for vowels, there are different colors. All of them are around the color red to orange to dark red. Now, qalqala, khalaqnakum is given the bright blue color. It indicates multiplying the sound of a consonant to produce a strong tone. خلقناكم rather than saying خلقناكم. خلقناكم. Now another حكم is تفخيم. لفظ الجلالة Allah here we don't say يعلمون الله, we say الله. Allah is تفخيم. When the sound of the letter resonate to fill the whole mouth. And to the opposite of that is ترقيق. Bismillah, not Bismillah. Okay, in that case we do tarqiq for lafz al-jalala. When the voice of the letter, the lam in lafz al-jalala is reduced, the mouth is not filled with its repellency. So it's the opposite of tafkhim. Now, don't worry about memorizing or understanding the depth of these rules. This presentation acts no more than an introduction. I want you to have in mind that there are different rules with different actions taken on those letters that we apply those rules on. And in the Mushaf al-Tajweed, those letters are given colors that will help us to remember and understand those rules. Let's summarize what we have learned in this introductory lesson. We have understood the meaning and the definition of Tajweed and al-Lahn. We became aware of the best method to learn Tajweed. We realized how Quran Learning Management System applications would help you mastering the Tajweed. We understood the value of using colors of Tajweed Quran, Mushaf al-Tajweed al-Mulawwan, in reminding you of Tajweed rules. And we took a bird's eye view of the topics of this series that we're calling Simplified Tajweed Series. And finally, we introduced some of the Tajweed definitions and introduced some of its terminology. With that, we reached the end of this lesson, which was an introduction to Tajweed, in which we also introduced how to work on improving your Tajweed using this simplified Tajweed series with the accompanying Quran Learning Management System. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that بعونه وقدرته that the Quran Learning Management System, برنامج الجامع لحفظة كتاب الله, would help you, inshallah, to improve your tajweed and improve your tilawa and help you in improving your recitation and help you, if you want, in memorizing the Quran and to help you understand the Quran in the proper way. As we reach the end, we ask Al-Mawla Azza wa Jal أن يتقبل منا هذا العمل. We ask Allah Almighty to accept this work from us, and we ask you to make dua for those who participated in making this work come to life and reach you. Hoping you all the best. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.